Welcome to our channel, Story and Me. Let's begin with today's story. I wake to the muted murmur of voices and the faint scent of incense and lilies. Blinking in confusion, I find myself standing at the back of a crowded hall, draped in black. Rows of chairs stretch out before me, filled with familiar faces, etched in grief. At the front of the hall, a large framed photo of a smiling man sits on an easel, amid wreaths of white lilies. It takes me a disorienting moment to realize the photo is of me. My heart lurches in my chest, except I have no heartbeat. A chill washes over me as I step forward, drawn toward the front. My shoes make no sound on the carpeted aisle. No one seems to notice me weaving through the crowd. I stop a few feet away from a polished mahogany coffin, its lid open to reveal the still figure inside. My own face, peaceful and oddly waxen, lies within, hands folded over my chest. I'm dressed in my best charcoal gray suit. I recognize the tie Emily gave me on our anniversary. This can't be real. My last memory surfaces, driving home on a dark, rain-slick road, the blare of a horn, the glare of headlights veering into my lane. I remember a jolt of terror, the screech of metal, then searing pain, and then nothing. Now, I'm here. Am I dead? A minister stands at the podium, voice gentle and somber, as he speaks about my life. I hear words like beloved husband, father, and successful entrepreneur, and it feels surreal to hear my eulogy. I drift closer to the front row. My parents are there. My mother's face is buried in a handkerchief. My father's staring stoically ahead, with red-rimmed eyes. My younger sister, Chloe, sits beside them, her face wet with tears as she clutches our mother's arm. The sight of their grief twists in me. I reach out instinctively to put a hand on my mother's shoulder, to comfort her. My hand passes right through her body, as if through mist. I gasp soundlessly and yank my arm back. No one notices. Of course they don't. I'm a ghost, I realize with dawning horror. I'm dead, and yet, still here. Mark rises from beside Emily and walks to the podium as the minister steps aside. Mark Sullivan, my best friend, is about to deliver a eulogy. He grips the lectern, eyes glistening. Ryan was my best friend for nearly 20 years, he begins, voice thick with emotion. He was like a brother to me. Standing here today, saying goodbye, is the hardest thing I've ever had to do. A heavy silence falls in the hall, broken only by muffled sobs. Emily sits in the front row, veiled in black, shoulders shaking. My mother holds one of her arms. On Emily's other side, Mark had been sitting close, with a supportive arm around her back. Even now as he speaks, his eyes keep flickering to my wife, as if speaking directly to her. He built a successful company from the ground up, but he never let it change who he was. Mark continues, voice trembling. He was always there with a helping hand or a word of advice. He loved his family more than anything. Emily, he turns to my wife gently. He adored you. Every conversation we had somehow came back to you, and how much joy you gave him. My vision blurs with tears I cannot shed. Thank you, Mark, I think. Heart aching. It means the world to hear my life meant something. I look at Emily. She is quietly sobbing, face in her hands. My mother shifts closer, wrapping an arm around Emily's shaking shoulders. Mark's voice drops to a whisper. I don't know how we'll go on without him, but I promise I'll do everything I can to honor his memory. He looks directly at Emily. I'll be there for his family, just as he would have been for mine. Ryan, if you're somehow listening, we miss you, buddy. We'll never forget you. I am listening, Mark. I'm right here. I want to cry out, to thank him and tell them all I'm still here. Overcome, I step in front of Mark, directly between him and the crowd, and wave my arms. Not a single eye shifts toward me. I don't even cast a shadow. A wave of loneliness crashes over me. I stand inches from my wife and my best friend, and I'm utterly invisible. Emily raises her head, and I freeze. Her face is blotchy, eyes swollen from crying. For one hopeful moment, her gaze seems to flick to where I stand. Did she sense me? I hold my breath. An old habit, since I have no breath now. But Emily's eyes slide away, lost in her grief. She didn't see me. Nobody can. Mark finishes speaking, voice breaking on the final words. As he returns to his seat, he briefly squeezes Emily's hand. She nods at him, leaning into his touch for a second. I notice Chloe narrow her eyes slightly at that gesture, before bowing her head. A faint unease pricks at me seeing Mark's hand linger on Emily's shoulder, but it's drowned in the guilt that I'm not the one comforting my wife. The service concludes with a final prayer. Emily is asked if she'd like to say anything, but she only shakes her head, overcome. Instead, she rises unsteadily and approaches my coffin for a last goodbye. I hover nearby, aching to hold her. Emily places a trembling hand on the polished wood. "Oh, Ryan," she whispers, voice raw. "I love you. I always will." Tears slip down her cheeks. Watching my wife break down over my lifeless body is a torture I never imagined. I reach to caress her face, to wipe away those tears. My fingers pass through her like smoke. She shivers, perhaps feeling a chill from my futile touch. Leaning down, she presses a final kiss to my forehead, her tears dampening my skin. The tenderness and agony in that moment shatter what's left of my heart. As Emily steps back, Mark is suddenly by her side to steady her. The pallbearers begin to lift my coffin. The lid closes, sealing in the sight of my own corpse. My mother breaks into a sob, collapsing against my father as the finality hits her. The raw pain in her cry hits me like a physical blow. I want to scream, to wail with her, but I have no voice. Slowly, the coffin is carried down the aisle. Mourners bow their heads or reach out to touch the coffin in farewell as it passes. I follow, a helpless shadow trailing the procession. Outside, it's drizzling under a gray sky. The cemetery is only a short walk away, and I drift along behind the slow-moving hearse, surrounded by the hushed procession of mourners with umbrellas. At the graveside, the goodbyes continue. I watch in numb silence as Emily kneels and places a single white rose on top of my lowered casket. My father tosses a handful of soil onto it, his stoic mask crumbling as he turns away. Mark hovers protectively near Emily, a hand on her back. Thunder rumbles in the distance as people begin to drift away from the grave. Emily is one of the last to leave, escorted by Mark, who holds an umbrella over her. She pauses once, looking back at the headstone bearing my name with an unreadable expression. Regret, sorrow, something else. Then she turns and walks away, leaning into Mark as they depart down the path. I remain by my grave, rain falling straight through me. The priest murmurs a final prayer that I barely register. It's done. I'm dead and buried. Yet here I stand, a spirit tethered to the world by some unfinished business I can't yet fathom. Lightning forks the distant sky. With one last heartbroken glance at the headstone with my name, I turn and follow the fading figures of Emily and Mark into the mist. I cannot accept that this is the end. Not like this. I need to see my family. I need to see what happens next. After the funeral, close family and friends gather at our house in a muted attempt at comfort. I drift among them like a lost shadow. Condolences murmur through the rooms, but all I focus on is Emily and Mark. They rarely leave each other's side. Mark offers my wife a steady stream of support, an arm around her shoulders, a whispered word as needed. To anyone else, it looks like a dear friend fulfilling a promise to a fallen brother. But I catch the way Mark's hand lingers at her waist when he thinks no one sees, and how Emily leans into him ever so slightly. An uneasy suspicion coils in my gut, one I try to deny. In one corner, my mother sobs into my father's chest, their world shattered. Seeing my parents so broken nearly brings me to my knees. As twilight deepens, the visitors gradually take their leave. Hugs, tearful goodbyes at the door. And finally the house is quiet and dim. Only Emily and Mark remain, thinking themselves alone. I hover in a far corner of the living room, watching. Emily sinks onto the couch, wiping her red-rimmed eyes. Mark sits beside her close. In the dim lamplight, their guarded expressions loosen the moment the last guest departs. "It's over," Mark murmurs under his breath. "You did well. Everyone bought it." Emily closes her eyes and exhales shakily, playing the devastated widow. "It was harder than I expected," she whispers. Her tone is different now, steadier, controlled, without the quaver of tears. Mark rests a hand on her knee in a gesture far too intimate for mere friendship. My mind reels. Had there been signs all along? I think back to countless dinners and holidays we all shared. Never once did I suspect a thing. How blind I was. Mark's voice is gentle. I know. But now we can breathe. No one suspects a thing. My bloodless veins run cold. Suspects? Dread prickles through me. I drift closer, hardly daring to believe what I'm hearing. Emily opens her eyes, fixing Mark with a hard look. "Still, seeing his coffin? I almost lost it," she mutters. "I kept thinking someone would see right through me." Mark gives a tight, grim smile. "They didn't. We pulled it off." Pulled it off. I stare at them, heart pounding in my chest, or it would be if I still had one. Emily and Mark share a look that passes between them like some unspoken victory. A wave of nausea and disbelief washes over me. Emily runs a hand over her face. "God, what have we done, Mark?" Mark's facade falters. Guilt flickers in his eyes. He takes her hand in both of his. "What we had to do," he says, voice barely above a whisper. "For us. There was no other way." A cold, soundless cry tears from my throat. It hits me with the force of a freight train. They orchestrated my death. The accident was no accident at all. In a flash, a memory surfaces. Our wedding day, when Mark stood beside me as my best man, and Emily vowed to be by my side, till death do us part. They were the two people I trusted and cherished most in this world. How could they plot to destroy me? Emily's eyes glisten as she squeezes Mark's hands. It had to be done quickly, before he found out about us," she mutters. "We'll get through this. Mark assures her, though his voice wavers. We have each other now. That's all that matters. My vision darkens at the edges as fury and heartbreak flood me. I loved these people, trusted them. Now they sit here speaking of a future built on my murder. I want to shriek, to unleash the full agony of my betrayal upon them. But I am dead and powerless. They can't hear the silent howl of the betrayed dead. Emily stands, still gripping Mark's hand. Let's go upstairs. We should try to sleep, she says quietly. Tomorrow, we start our new life. Mark nods and rises with her. He places hand at the small of her back as they head for the staircase. To my horror, she allows the touch, even leans subtly toward him. In my own home, under my roof, they already move together like husband and wife. As their figures disappear up the stairs, my shock hardens into resolve. I will not leave this world yet. Not until I uncover every last detail of their betrayal and make them face justice for what they've done. I linger in the darkness of the empty living room, burning with rage and heartbreak. My wife and my best friend, my killers, are just upstairs, likely slipping into the bed I once shared with her. The urge for vengeance surges inside me white hot. I want to scream, to smash things, to make them feel even a fraction of the terror and pain I felt. As my rage builds, the lamp in the corner begins to flicker wildly, casting jittery shadows. Mark, on the upstairs landing, pauses and looks around in alarm. Emily wraps her robe tightly around herself as a sudden cold draft sweeps through the house. But even as I gather my will to act, fate intervenes. Headlights flash through the front window. Moments later, the quiet is broken by the soft click of the front door opening. Chloe, my sister, slips inside. Her face etched with worry and resolve. She must have sensed something was wrong. Perhaps the same uneasy observations I made have been gnawing at her. Emily, Mark. Chloe calls softly into the dim foyer. Upstairs, I hear a startled creak of the floorboards. Emily and Mark exchange a panicked look as they come hurriedly down. They thought they were alone. Now Chloe stands in the entryway, eyes red but determined. Chloe? Emily's voice is tight. She stops a few steps from the bottom. It's so late. What are you doing here? Chloe closes the door gently behind her. I'm sorry to barge in, she says, voice trembling slightly. I couldn't shake the feeling that something isn't right. Mark descends the last step and tries to muster a reassuring tone. Chloe, it's been a rough day. You should be resting. Chloe's gaze zeroes in on how close he stands to Emily, and he falters. Mark, why are you here so late? She asks, suspicion sharpened by grief. You two, you hardly left each other's side all day. The way you were holding her. Her voice breaks. Please, I need the truth. Were you involved? Emily's eyes widen behind her veil of composure. What exactly are you implying? She asks, a warning edge to her voice. Chloe steps forward, tears in her eyes. I'm implying that my brother might have been betrayed. That you, she points a shaking finger at Mark, and you, at Emily, were more than just friends. And that maybe Ryan's accident wasn't an accident. A tremor of silence. Emily's face blanches. Mark looks as if he's been struck. That's insane, Emily says, forcing a brittle laugh. I know you're upset. But how can you think? Chloe cuts her off, voice rising. Because nothing about this feels right. I saw you two at the funeral, huddled together. And I know Ryan drove that route every day. He was a careful driver. He told me just last month his brakes felt off, and he'd get them checked. Did you do something to his car? Her question hangs quivering in the air. Mark's composure shatters. Chloe, listen. No. Chloe's voice cracks like a whip. You owe me the truth, now. Mark opens his mouth, guilt plain on his face, but Emily suddenly steps in front of him, her eyes flashing. Mark, don't say another word, she snaps. Chloe's lips part in horror at Emily's tone. Oh my God, she whispers. It's true. What did you do? Her voice trembles on the verge of a sob. Emily's facade of grief has fallen away, replaced by cold panic. In one swift motion, she yanks open the drawer of the foyer table. My heart lurches when I see her pull out a small handgun. My handgun that I kept for home protection. She levels it at Chloe, arm shaking. Emily! Mark yells aghast. He reaches toward her reflexively. Stay back, Emily barks, eyes wild and brimming with tears. She steps forward, aiming the gun directly at my sister's chest. Chloe raises her hands slowly, face white with fear. Emily, don't do this, Chloe pleads, voice shaking. Think of what? I'm sorry, Chloe. Emily chokes out, tears spilling now. But I can't let you spread crazy accusations and ruin everything. Mark moves between them, palms out. Emily, put it down. This isn't what we planned. He's pale as a ghost himself. We never talked about hurting anyone else. Emily's voice is high, near hysterical. She knows Mark. What choice do we have? Her finger tightens on the trigger. Call the police, she hisses at him, without taking her eyes off my sister. We'll tell them she came here in a frenzy, that we had to defend ourselves. I am horrified. Even now, caught in her lies, my wife is ready to kill again to save herself. Mark is frozen in shock, torn between his loyalty to her and the horror of what she's about to do. He swallows hard and edges in front of Chloe. I won't let you hurt her, he says, voice trembling, but firm as he shields my sister with his body. Emily, this has to stop, now. Emily's face crumples in anguish and fury. Move, Mark, she warns through her teeth. Don't make me shoot you too. He stands his ground, tears in his eyes. If that's who you've become, then go ahead, he whispers. I'm done protecting you from the consequences. For a heartbeat, none of them move. I can feel the tension, see Emily's finger whitening against the trigger. My sister's life hangs by a thread. I refuse to let her die for my sake. Summoning every ounce of my otherworldly strength, I focus on the gun and the woman holding it. Now, for an agonizing moment, I feel nothing but air resisting my effort. Then somehow my will connects. I collide with her shoulder, forcing it aside, just as her finger squeezes the trigger. With a furious cry, I lunge into Emily. The gun goes off with an ear-splitting crack. The bullet smashes into the wall, missing Chloe by feet. Emily, knocked off balance by the unseen force of my desperate attack, tumbles to the floor with a cry, the pistol skittering out of her hand. Mark wastes no time. He dives forward and grabs the gun. Chloe rushes in as well, pinning Emily's arms down as she tries weakly to fight. A wail of despair pours from Emily's lips, and she goes limp, breaking into sobs that rack her body. It's over. Neighbors, alerted by the gunshot, start banging on the front door, and within minutes, flashing red and blue lights bathe the house. Police officers burst into a scene of utter betrayal. My sister crying and restraining my hysterical widow, and my best friend holding a gun, tears streaming down his face. Everything after that comes in a blur. Mark, sobbing openly now, blurts out a confession the moment officers demand the weapon. He tells them everything, how he and Emily conspire to tamper with my car's brakes, how they watched me drive to my death. Chloe's face crumples with grief at each ugly detail. Emily only screams denials through her tears, but Mark's guilt is undeniable. The officers, looking stunned and grim, handcuff them both. As Emily is hauled to her feet, she turns a devastated gaze on Chloe. "I'm sorry," she cries, but my sister just steps back, eyes full of disgust and sorrow. Within the hour, the two of them are taken away in squad cars. I expected to feel vindication, watching them led off in chains. But instead, I feel only a profound sorrow for everything lost. The horror is over now, and the truth is out. They will face earthly justice for their sins. Chloe stands on the front lawn, under the rotating red lights, arms wrapped around herself. She is trembling, her face a mask of shock and heartbreak, as she watches the police cars disappear into the night. My heart aches for her, and for my parents who will soon have their last illusions shattered. I hover beside my sister, wishful that I could hold her. Gently, I rest a ghostly hand on her shoulder. Of course, she can't feel my touch, but some part of her must sense something, because she shivers and then brings her hand up to that shoulder, as if covering mine. "You've found the truth for me," I whisper, even though she can't hear. "Thank you, Chloe." A broken sob escapes her. She whispers into the darkness, voice hitching, "I miss you, Ryan. I miss you so much." Perhaps she only speaks to memory, but I like to imagine she knows I'm there. The flashing lights fade as the police drive off. The night grows still and quiet, the air cool. I become aware of a gentle warmth at my back. A soft golden glow has appeared just beyond the curb, growing brighter by the second. There's a gentle warmth to it, familiar and comforting, as if loved ones who passed before me are waiting just beyond. It calls to me, peaceful and patient. I know instinctively what it is. It's the doorway home. The weight that kept me here is gone. I understand now that vengeance won't bring me back or heal those I love. Only by releasing my bitterness can I truly be free. Justice has been set in motion for those who betrayed me, and I have said my silent goodbyes. I glance at my sister one last time. Chloe has sunk to the curb, face in her hands, tears of grief and relief mingling. I wish I could tell her that I'm at peace now, that she must go on and be happy. Maybe some part of her already knows. I turn toward the radiant doorway. With each step I feel lighter, shedding the pain and anger that weighed me down. Memories of love and laughter drift through me. Emily's bright smile and better days. Mark's hearty laugh during our college pranks. My parents' proud faces. Chloe's unwavering support. Despite everything, those good moments are what I choose to carry forward. I pause at the threshold of the light and take one last look at the world I'm leaving. The sky is beginning to lighten toward dawn. In time, my family will heal. They'll keep my memory alive and find joy again. That thought gives me comfort. Taking a deep breath, I don't technically need, I step through the glowing doorway. A profound sense of peace washes over me, warm and gentle. In my final moment on earth, a single tear of release falls. Then I am gone, embraced by whatever comes next. Goodbye. Thank you for listening to the entire story. Please comment and let me know which part of the world are you listening from. Share the video and subscribe to my channel